Welcome to Language Access Matters, the podcast that dives deep into the crucial role of language access in public services and businesses. I am your host, Carol Velandia, and I invite you to join me on a journey of discovery and empowerment. Language access is not just a matter of convenience. It is a fundamental human right and the key that unlocks doors to essential services and opportunities. In this podcast, we'll explore the far-reaching impact of language access, examining how it shapes not only healthcare, justice, and education, but also the world of business. Through thought-provoking interviews, insightful discussions, and compelling stories, we will unveil the power of language access. We will hear from professionals who bridge communication gaps to provide quality care for diverse communities. We will explore the intersection of language, law, and justice, and the crucial role that interpreters and translators play in ensuring fair and equitable treatment. We will delve into the challenges and innovations, as well as how language access opens doors to effective communication and inclusion, and how it makes our society more equitable. But our exploration doesn't stop there. We will also uncover the profound impact of language access in the world of business. We will hear from entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and experts who understand the value of inclusive and effective communication and how it drives success in today's global marketplace. Language Access Matters is your platform to understand the significance of language access in these vital sectors of society. We will shed light on the barriers faced by individuals and communities and the innovative solutions that promote inclusion and equality. Whether you are a healthcare professional, a legal expert, an educator, a business owner, a linguist, an advocate, or simply passionate about the power of language, this podcast is for you. Together, we will navigate the challenges, celebrate the victories, and advocate for a world where language access truly matters. So, join me on this enlightening journey as we uncover the impact of language access in healthcare, justice, education, and businesses. Let's amplify the voices of the 25 million people that don't speak English in the United States and those that don't speak the dominant language around the world. Those voices deserve to be heard and empowered, and we need to empower ourselves to build a more inclusive future. Welcome to Language Access Matters. Let's embark on this transformative exploration together. Good morning, Sultan. It's wonderful to have you here. How are you?
Hello, Carol. I am very proud, honored, excited, and feel great to be here talking to you today about something very dear to me and very exciting.
We are too. We have been friends for a while now, ever since I joined the Association of Language Companies. You have always been a wonderful resource to us, very generous, and I really treasure your friendship. And I'm delighted that you accepted to talk today on artificial intelligence in our Language Access Matters podcast.
Thank you. And I want to congratulate you on this podcast, on this conversation. I think you are a very unique talent in our industry. And I think you are going to uncover some very important topics that will not just benefit the industry, but also the end users of our industry. So I am very honored to be part of this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I definitely hope so. I definitely hope that people are interested in the topic from all areas of the different industries. And with that, I want to officially introduce you, Sultan. Sultan Ghaznawi is the president of Hybrid Lynx, based in Toronto, Canada. He has been involved in the language industry since 2006. His company provides language translation into rare and hard to find languages in the areas of education, healthcare, finance, legal, and climate change. In addition, Hybrid Lynx also provides data annotation and collection services for artificial intelligence applications and solutions. Sultan also hosts the Translation Company Talk podcast and is engaged in the language industry through many volunteer and pro bono initiatives. He speaks at conferences and events and believes in improving quality of life for people globally through the use of language. That is wonderful, Sultan. Thank you so much. But this is your official introduction. I want you to tell me more about who you are, what you do for hobbies, and things that make you find pleasure in life as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Well, as I said, I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and I find interest in languages because I speak a few languages myself, whether by choice or not. I learned them throughout my life, and I find it always fascinating to learn about cultures, about language. And language actually enables me to learn about other cultures, about people, about their problems, challenges, opportunities, and so forth. And being part of this industry has allowed me to mature in a way that I wouldn't if I was a unilingual speaker. And I've seen people's the different demographics and cultures globally and the kind of issues that they have that normally we don't hear about in the media. And I think that it's very, very exciting if we could alleviate some of the world problems through language, through communication. I think the biggest issue we have in the world is misunderstanding, which is causing all kinds of conflicts and issues. And we can be the enabler of creating understanding and bridge those gaps. I think what you're doing with language access and your organization, Equal Access Language Services, what it's doing is making a profound change at grassroots level as well as at mainstream community level to make more people live better, to do better things with their lives. And I think that's been the goal of us humans from the very start, to live better lives. And that excites me to see that there's so much initiative. Our industry is profoundly involved in making things better, although there is obviously a business objective, a business case behind it. But all in all, we are all going through, looking at the same objective, and that is to make people's lives better, to solve a real problem in this world. In terms of my personal life, I am married. I have two children, and we have been living in Toronto for a very long time. My hobbies are more or less, just like yourself in our industry, where knowledge is a service that we offer to people. So it's always about learning, reading, communicating, and being engaged and involved. And I am very, very happy that folks like yourself are opening up these forums and these venues where we can come and contribute. And hopefully, as a result, someone can learn something and do something better with their business, with their life, and so on.
I love your comments about really living for something beyond oneself and really trying to help community, and also how language is so important for communicating better, of course, but also to alleviate conflict in the world. Is like a very expansive vision on language. Thank you for that. And Sultan, you have become a leading expert on artificial intelligence. Can you tell us how did you become one?
Thank you so much for calling me an expert. I don't think I'm an expert by any means whatsoever. I think I'm more of an enthusiast than anything else, Carol. But how I got engaged with artificial intelligence and what I know about it that I do right now is because I have an engineering and computer science education background. In my previous job, I worked for a Canadian telecom, and I developed software and created specifications for operating system architecture for mobile devices. Some of that probably even exists in devices today. I'm talking about the early 2000s. So that opened my eyes to the possibilities that exists out there with the help of computer processing, kind of things that we could do. I was always fascinated by the level of automation possible by computer processors. And my language background and my career in this industry, when in 2006 I started working in the language industry, it inspired me to find ways to automate tedious and repetitive work. I mean, at the time when I looked at translation memory, it was a new thing, it was a shiny thing. And I was fascinated at how we can reuse sentences to save time. But I wanted to look beyond that. So artificial intelligence was always there, but it was not something that I knew too much about. Around 2010, 2012, I started looking at things such as statistical machine learning, and I was fascinated by its scope of possibilities. And Google Translate came along, and machine translation was a very controversial topic in our industry, and that forced me to learn more and more about it. So I had some degree of knowledge of artificial intelligence and what it is and how it works. In 2017, something profound happened. Google introduced something called the Transformers technology. It was very different than what we were used to before. It enabled neural networks and deep learning technology. It is basically a machine learning technology that enables attention. So before, we would just take a word, and at the beginning we would use statistics to translate that. For example, later on we started to find ways to translate sentences. So it was basically based on statistics, and it was similar to what translation memory was kind of all about. So we would find a sentence and a match for it, and then we would see what the percentage of the matches and move on. And in statistical machine translation, kind of worked in that way, but a little bit more advanced. But what attention did was that it created the possibility to add context of a paragraph. So it would look at the sentence before the sentence and the sentence after, and then based on that, it would create the right translation. In fact, you didn't even need to have a translation. I mean, you didn't need to have a corpus to train this AI, but it was using some sophisticated deep learning technology. It would go through so many layers of neurons um, and synapses to come up with the right result. So at the end, instead of just statistically guessing the translation of something, it was based on a different technology. It involved so many level of computer thinking to come up with a result, in particular in text related applications that we call natural language processing, or NLP today. And while I was learning that at the time, my son was Alexander was in grade 6, and that year he also took an interest in AI, and he had a science project, and he created something. I saw him build it. He had no computer knowledge or anything. He taught himself how to build this very simple model that would take a number of symptom names and suggest a disease based on that symptom. For example, fever, cough, and so on would represent something like cold or a flu. And he won a science award for it in his school, and that caught my attention. So I got involved. Slowly, my company started receiving requirements for training machine translation engines and so forth. So we were involved in 2016, 2017 with that, and I kept an eye on it. I also had an opportunity to attend a course on AI, which is offered by MIT. I did that in 2020, and that helped me see a full picture of possibilities that it offers in terms of the business applications of artificial intelligence. So I started as a result writing code and experimenting with different types of models using libraries such as scikit-learn and several other ones, the primitive ones. And I experimented with data science in terms of structured data to train models, and found there was a business case for us. So, and then I said there is demand for it, and these structured data in the form of corpuses and so on can be made available to technology companies that could actually, as a result, train their AI models, which is exactly what they needed. And we started offering that, and it was a good model for us. I think several other LSPs followed suit after that. And for the past several years, my company Hybrid Lynx has been heavily involved in training AI models, including large language models, or LLMs as they're known. We have now deep knowledge and experience with NLP in the areas of machine translation, speech recognition, natural language and understanding, chatbot training, and localization, as well as things such as OCR training that kind of overlaps with computer vision, and that's other applications of computer vision such as object detection and so on. So I'm very excited about the possibilities that artificial intelligence offers, and I'm happy we're talking about it, because as an industry, there is so many things for us that we can do together.
Very, very impressive, Sultan. You definitely are ahead of many people in the topic of AI. And just for our listeners who may not be very familiar with some of our acronyms, remind them what LLM is, NLP, and OCR.
So let's start with LLMs. These are large language models. These are artificial intelligence engines or models, just like machine translation engines, that were created from large language corpuses. That means Google or Amazon or Microsoft went and crawled the internet, and from that they developed patterns, and those patterns were mapped into this model. For example, a sentence to sentence mapping, well, which is not how it exactly works, but they created translation models from that. They created summarization models. So if you give it a book, for example, it will come back with one paragraph summary of what this book is all about. So that can only happen with very large corpuses. We are talking about gigabytes and terabytes of data. I mean, we are used to machine translation engines, which is probably a few megabytes, in some cases, maybe a gigabyte, that has been accumulated over many years of translation output. But this, imagine all the machine translation engines in the world were combined into one, and you call it a large language model.
Wow.
So that is what an LLM is. And the beauty of it is that majority of the LLMs are made available for free as an open source model. So anyone can go take it and improve on it, contribute back to the community, or decide not to, depending on the license. And it opens up so many possibilities. So that's what LLMs are. NLP obviously is the natural language processing. It's the part of artificial intelligence, or the subfield of artificial intelligence, that allows us to look at text and human communication, the way we use speech or text, and get computers to understand and process that language. So whether that language is in English, obviously English is primarily the dominant language when it comes to artificial intelligence, but languages like Chinese, Japanese, and many other ones have also been very, very active in the AI space. So that's what natural language processing, or NLP, is about: to understand and process human language. And then OCR is obviously optical character recognition. It involves taking a piece of scanned text or handwritten text and using computers to identify and read it. So first it has to look at that, and then from those characters, kind of develop intelligence. So what you do with that, applications of that already exist with scanners. It started in the 90s. You would scan a piece of paper, and a program such as Adobe Acrobat, for example, would be able to detect what's written in that. So create text or editable text off of that. But there are too many applications for that today. OCR goes beyond that. OCR hasn't been very active in foreign languages beyond Latin character sets. But nowadays, my company, for example, is involved in training OCRs for Arabic and for Chinese, and languages that typically the handwritten text would be very, very difficult for a computer to decipher and detect and create intelligence off of that. So yeah, I know that it can get confusing with these abbreviations, quite quickly. But by all means, make sure to if I'm going too fast or if I'm using too many of them, please ask me. I would be more than happy to break them down.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I am just as excited as you are about the possibilities that AI offers. So that is precisely why I wanted to interview you and understand how AI can be a potential tool to facilitate language access and reduce language barriers. How would you define language access within the context of AI?
So, Carol, I know this is a topic that's very, very dear to you, and I'm very proud of you because of that. Because language access enables improvement in life, and today is a large populations of people in the world that cannot access services, products, or even basic information that would save their lives because they don't have access to that information in their own languages. So, language access, to me, is solving a communication problem, and for the most part it affects the underrepresented and underserved communities. We're talking about communities who are racially in a disadvantage, who are, because of their numbers, they're in a disadvantage, and in some cases it also has to do with people's gender, and there's so many different dimensions of communities that put them in a disadvantage when it comes to language access. Lack of funding, lack of resource availability, lack of interest, and so on. Mostly, these things, they they affect communities that are at a disadvantage. So AI offers cost effective, quick, versatile, and dynamic solutions, such as multilingual chatbots that can provide information to users, freeing up precious and scarce resources to address the most critical situations. In the context of refugees, for example, people coming in large numbers, and let's say you are receiving 1,000 people a day and you only have 10 interpreters. Obviously, AI can play a role in there. For if someone wants to know where the bathroom is, you don't need an interpreter to actually help with that. You can use an AI solution for that. But when you're asking them to validate which country they're coming from, then you would apply a human interpreter to get that information and to communicate it, within the context of that conversation. With the scale and scope of AI models, large swaths of people across the world can find information in their own languages. I mean, that by itself is a very big advantage compared to how we deliver services today using manpower language output. I think at the end, Carol, people will find that their quality of lives have improved as a result of AI integration already, into their lifestyles. So Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa, Bixby, and there's so many other applications. These solutions already exist. People use them all over the world, and they don't even think about it. So it's very, very exciting when it comes to language access through artificial intelligence.
It is true that when you know how to use the different options that technology offers, you can make a process more efficient. So, excellent example about how, like, if somebody from a large refugee group comes and they need interpretation to know where the bathroom is, maybe you don't need a 2 hour minimum interpreter to help them with that, right? You can use something like artificial intelligence. But if there is something more nuanced that need more cultural understanding, or maybe the stakes are too high, maybe people should try to use other solutions. So, and I think that that is a big point in any kind of service that is critical, how not to use only one solution to address the language barrier. So thank you for that answer. And full disclosure, I was curious to know what AI itself would give me as possible questions with regards to AI and language access. And it came up with very interesting questions, actually. So it is definitely like having a bionic arm. You still operate your arm, but the strength of the arm is tenfold. So the following three questions were generated by AI. The quality of the result clearly depends on the quality of the input. I think that's one thing I have learned from
Right.
ChatGPT, right? So this was a question generated by AI itself. How can AI be leveraged to bring language barriers and promote inclusivity?
Right. That's a good question, and I'm glad AI came up with it. I mean, we've been talking about that for a while with manpower language services. But as I mentioned earlier, Carol, AI doesn't sleep and is always available, freeing up translators and interpreters to handle critical communications. It can promote inclusivity in the sense that more people of diverse backgrounds can be onboarded into services and programs that previously were not accessible to them due to lack of linguistic manpower. So, for example, if you're talking about a very rare language from Africa, some immigrant coming into the US and they do not speak English, they would be at a disadvantage in terms of finding housing or something like that because that housing agency may not have an interpreter available in their language and they have to wait. I don't know what type of consequences they would have faced, but that's not inclusivity because these people were not included in the equal housing program that's available to them, or at least it was delayed to them, right? So I think AI would address that situation in a way that does not discriminate. And large language models, or LLMs that we were just talking about, they have been largely ignored by our industry, I have to admit. They will take a big load off the shoulders of our industry that would previously tie up resources. So think of situations. where in the past we had to translate a piece of content that would be coming in. It had to go through the translation queue, wait for some time for its turn to come, and get it translated, get it reviewed, and send it out. It could be a simple piece of text that says, for this problem, call this number. But now that immigrant, or that, let's say, that person who speaks a different language, they may go to a solution such as ChatGPT or Siri in their own language and say, for this problem, for registering my child, where should I go? And that large language model or whatever solution it is, it comes up with a 1-800 phone number that they can call in. Their problem is solved. So
Mhm.
if you look at it, AI promotes inclusivity, and it breaks down language barriers in a sense that I have to say this, that we have failed to break down those barriers as an industry, because either the language was not critical, it was not profitable, or the amount of content was not important for us. And a lot of our clients, for example, didn't want to pay minimum fees for one sentence. They would not pay like $45. And as a result, someone who would need that one sentence would be at a disadvantage. But AI now enables us to promote inclusivity and break down that language barrier.
Right. Excellent. So, what are some of the main challenges in providing language access through AI technologies?
There are a few, and there will continue to be quite a few challenges going forward. And there are challenges that we haven't envisioned because the applications of AI are so unique. It's beyond a simple linear translation or interpretation of language that we are used to. I think the biggest challenge is making people comfortable to interface with AI. As an industry, we've been worried about the AI taking jobs and so forth, and we could have addressed one of the issues related to AI, and people find it strange enough to speak with a human being from a different culture. Right now, you replace that with a machine. We are used to our phones to interface with AI, but how do we handle children who are sick in hospitals? You can give them a phone to talk to AI, but that doesn't give them the same level of comfort or the same level of um, emotional visibility as they would talk to a human being face to face. So there is a challenge there, which would it's an obstacle in the way of adopting artificial intelligence knowledge into our daily lives. Language, while translation as an enabler of communication has been powered by AI applications such as machine translation for a long time, it is those real time interactions again that would need getting used to. So we have integrated AI to a large degree into video communications. Voices is still a major issue. We cannot perform voice to voice linguistic transformation, such as interpreting, and that will hopefully change soon, but it's not there. That's a challenge. And another problem is that despite all the developments over the past decade, AI is still a computer output which is void of any intuition, feeling, or spontaneity. It does not joke with you. It doesn't feel that you're in pain. It does not really know the context is that you're talking about. So that will be an issue, I think, for a very long time. That is not something we can solve today, and it is an area where humans have an advantage, but not with the scale, of course.
And I think that could also be an advantage because it is, or at least it creeps me out a little bit to have an artificial intelligence having a spontaneity or the sense that they have any sort of feeling. It could be potentially scary, if you will. And also, what about the idea that some information might be inaccurate? I was reading an article about how an attorney was in big trouble because he asked, I think it was ChatGPT, to cite articles or cases for him to create his defense, and ChatGPT just made them up. They hallucinated. Is that something that you see is going to be corrected? How would you describe that?
So, Carol, people forget that there is nothing intelligent about artificial intelligence. The name itself is very misleading because they say artificial intelligence. People think, oh, human intelligence, right? How intelligent we are. Like if you talk to a 5-year-old kid, ask him about what he wants for lunch, he will be confused. That confusion is a gift to humans because that forces them to think and in ways develop intuition and do all kinds of things with that confusion. Computers don't have that. Computers, this artificial intelligence is all it is basically a knowledge retrieval system, an automated knowledge retrieval system. So chat GPT, you give me an example, it is trained on large amounts of data from the internet. So it basically what it does is it stitches up that data whenever you ask some question, and it tells you what it knows. It's like taking a child. I mean, this is not a probably very good example, but if you're taking a child and you put them in a room and raise them in that room and tell them the possibilities that exist within that room, but nothing about the outside world, right? One day that child will grow up and you ask him about how a flower grows, and he will say you have to put it in front of the window. He will not know that you have to go, you can also raise plant a flower in the garden, and you have to water it and so on. But the point is that ChatGPT has learned from us, from our mistakes, from our data. And that highlights the need for quality training data for artificial intelligence. And internet obviously is as good as it is not perfect. There's all kinds of information. So if a lawyer consults chat gpt to do his job, first of all, I wouldn't hire this lawyer because this lawyer obviously is trying to outsource his thinking to a machine, and I wouldn't pay him the ridiculous amount of fee that he would be charging me. So if he's making that
Correct.
mistake, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like if he's making that mistake, that means he's blindly simply getting things done, and he's just in a way deceiving his clients. So yes, artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It's based on the data that it was trained on, and it will make mistakes. And it's our job as humans to be in charge of critical decision making.
That's an excellent point because we should not use the tools to replace anything that we can do. I mean, if anything, we should, as you pointed out, lead that artificial intelligence and be more intelligent or intelligent, if you will, in order to really use it correctly, like really leverage the power of it. And the last question that ChatGPT came up with was, what role does natural language processing, or NLP, play in enhancing language access?
Again, good question from ChatGPT. NLP plays a massive role with language access. I think it has enabled us to understand people and their wants and their needs, and based on that, take a response, and we can automate that response. So, machine translation, text classification, sentiment analysis, and text summarization are some of the key NLP applications that enable language access. If you for example look at hospitals, right, they could use NLP to classify people's reactions in emergency room, and based on their reaction, implement some sort of sentiment analysis, and they can actually categorize urgency based on the type of words that they use. So language access can be improved with NLP. Speech is also an important NLP field, and my company offers transformation of speech into text in 100 plus languages. These were the kind of things that were not available before, or were very, very time consuming in the past. And we see a massive amount of content passing through our models, enabling reach to millions or billions of content users and people globally. So NLP does enhance language access in ways that we haven't even thought of, and that's beyond translation and interpreting.
And in fact, I hope to use one of your models, the models that you have developed, to make this podcast more accessible, because it ideally would come out in different languages. It's going to take some time, obviously, but that's one of the things I want to do, is to transcribe the conversation, translate it, and then rebroadcast it again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Thank you. Can you provide a few examples of AI applications that have successfully improved language access in various domains, like, for example, healthcare, education, justice, or any other public or private service?
Absolutely, Carol. I think that we don't have to look too far to find good examples. I give the examples of digital assistants like Siri earlier. There are other niche or industry specific chatbots and digital assistants that have been created and that solve problems on a daily basis. I mean, we are looking at chatbots on websites. People come in and ask about your services, and you don't have to have a person manning that website or the chat room all the time. So, for basic conversations, that load can be taken by AI. ChatGPT is another very good example that works well in most industries. Again, as I said, it's stitching content from what it has learned from the web. It's not perfect, but something like ChatGPT can be taken and customized, if you will, or fine tuned so that it becomes an expert in your industry or in your company and provides the right type of knowledge to your users. I know many telecom call centers use AI to communicate with customers, and they document their communication with live agents. They use such solutions for analytics and so on, and it builds intelligence over time, and which is valuable to a degree that we couldn't in the past accomplish before. So chatbots were instrumental again in providing COVID and vaccine information in many languages, in particular in Canada, for example. I know that Germany also implemented them during those dark days of the pandemic. So I think that was a success story of AI, which enabled people to gain information in their own languages timely when, for example, there were limited resources for vaccines available, or people needed to go to hospitals and check themselves and on a daily basis, the symptoms presentation were changing and so forth. These chatbots, they were able to reach wider parts of the population than humans would have had in the past. So I think technology there, especially AI, played a critical role. Call centers, as I mentioned earlier, have reduced costs and scaled access to people in a variety of industries by deploying chatbots, speech solutions, and much more that interact with customers. They address their customer service issues and gather valuable intelligence about the quality of their products, market, competition, and product development. Basically, if they wanted, if customers want something different, or then the AI can come up and say, it looks like the trend shows that customers want product X versus Y, and so forth. So before, all of that was manual. It was possible, but now it's a lot easier, and AI enables to see such trends and such matrix very quickly.
Whenever there is a technological advancement or a scientific development, I worry about ethics. So, what ethical considerations should be taken into account when developing AI systems for language access?
Ethics is something really, really important. I have to say that as humans, as a species, we are very ethical, but we have failed um, to uphold ethics in basically any industry, and that includes even our own. What people do with translation. You mentioned the lawyer earlier who was trusted to solve a legal problem, but he outsourced it to a computer, and that's an ethical problem. In healthcare, there's all kinds of ethical issues exist, and in politics, we have ethical issues. So it's kind of unfair to expect AI to not have any ethical issues when, as a human species, we haven't fixed our own ethical problems, right?
Good point. Absolutely, yeah.
There are a few things that need to be taken into account when it comes to AI. Training data is critical, but one must know where the data came from. Did that data, training data, come from scraping the web? In that case, the people who created the data probably didn't get compensated for their data, which is an ethical issue. Web data is also copyrighted or trademarked. Most likely, the AI models trained on such data are breaking the law because they are not, they didn't purchase the copyright for it. When it comes to language translation, training machine translation engines with customer data such as translation memories, it's a gray area, right?
Hmm.
The practice today includes some companies, what they do is that they take their translation memories and they anonymize them. They remove the brand name of the customer that paid for that translation, and they use such corpuses to train artificial intelligence with the hopes that this plain generic anonymized data will make the AI intelligent. And I don't know if this is the right thing or not, but it exists. It might be an ethical issue if some people are actually don't even apply anonymization. Privacy is another issue. ChatGPT, for example, was using user prompts to retrain the model. In Canada, they're under investigation. In the EU, I think they have an issue, and even in the US recently, they were subpoenaed to come and speak at the Congress and define how it upholds privacy laws. The prompts can include within ChatGPT. Those prompts can include private user data, which is a violation of privacy in places like, as I mentioned, in Canada. So that is another ethical challenge that needs to be overcome. There is the issue of bias, obviously, which comes from the nature of training data and AI making assumptions for or against a specific category of people or things. This is dangerous, Carol, because as we've seen, some minorities have been discriminated against by AI solutions as recent as this month, actually. So, yeah, there are quite a few ethical challenges, and they are not easy to be addressed quickly. And in fact, in some cases, there's probably no solution because as humans, we continue to have that bias. And we are the ones who pass that bias to these computers.
That's incredible. I was ready to say before you said that how it would be great that artificial intelligence wouldn't have the biases that we do, but apparently it is just a mirror of who we are as well, right? It will simply expand whatever we already bring to the prompts or to the teaching of artificial intelligence models. And very good point about ethics and how obviously we shouldn't hold the artificial intelligence to or the artificial intelligence to a higher standard that we're already holding humans, correct? So I am surprised to know and disappointed that we are passing the biases to the AI solutions. That compounds the problem. So speaking of biases, can how can biases and cultural nuances be addressed in AI powered language access tools?
Carol, that's actually a very, very good question. There is obviously an ongoing debate on AI bias, and it's gaining more popularity every day. There's more people getting engaged, which is a good thing. But in a sense, as you mentioned, it's a mirror of our reality. And we have to look at how we are addressing this bias as a species ourselves before we find a solution to artificially address that bias. And I think it is too early to suggest a solution. So, training, retraining, and continuous testing and monitoring must become part of the normal maintenance process of AI models. New technologies such as knowledge graphs, which are databases of real world objects and relationships between them, can help in deciphering and successfully passing context in transformative NLP applications, such as machine translation. What I mean by that is that machine translations can be made more smarter by explaining certain concepts for them and why something is a certain way in a specific culture. So when it's translating into another language, it actually translates it in a culturally sensitive manner. I think that is also an opportunity to develop knowledge systems for our industry, and nobody knows how a culture works better than speakers of that culture, people who are native of that culture, who speak the language of that culture. So we have that advantage, and I think we can put that to good use. Machine translation systems can also implement contextual metadata describing what a segment pair is about, and that would add an additional layer of intelligence which will reduce cultural errors and possibly reduce bias in translation in that process. Also, I think a decision should be made whether to use real world data, which reflects and includes normal human bias, as we talked about, to train AI models, which will then retain those biases reflected in our society. So, is it okay to see, certain levels of bias that we show to each other? Is it okay that artificial intelligence did the same to each of us or to that specific segment or group? Or should we alternate as an alternative artificially or through synthetic training data, which means that it has been handcrafted to train a specific model? Should we use that type of data to simulate a real world situation through AI without certain biases? Should we train an algorithm to function without such biases? It's again an ethical question. It is an ethical and societal dilemma. I think that algorithms must be designed with that in mind. And as a species, as we grow, as we develop, I think over time the effects will be profound. We have a choice to grow naturally as a species or create synthetic data based on what we think is right today. So future generations that will interact with AI, for example, they may be void of those biases. I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer for it.
Yeah, or at least nothing we can determine yet. And this sounds so expansive and so advanced that it could be quite scary, especially for people that depend on the language industry. So, addressing the language industry, should AI be considered a threat to the language industry or rather a tool for expansion and improvement? What are your thoughts?
Carol, I think it comes down to perspective. If your perspective is that the world should not change, then that's the biggest threat to you. If your perspective in the language industry is that I'm open to change and change is the only constant in the planet or in the universe, then I think you are watching one of the most exciting times in the history of humankind, that we could be part of a big movement. So I think it both is the case. It is a threat and it's an opportunity. I think AI will be a very big existential threat to individuals and companies in the language space who ignore it or who turn their back to it and say it will never come and take anything from me. AI again will creep into every single aspect of language industry. We talked about NLP. It is the most funded technology on the planet, probably in billions, and soon probably trillions of dollars will go into NLP and collective investment. I don't know if you've been monitoring the stock market, but Nvidia has their stock went up like crazy. I think by 20-30% in the past couple of days, just because they provide the chips for large language models. Again, large language models. Their stocks went up because they process language models. So that amount of money coming into this technology is obviously it's a great opportunity, but also a great threat to those of us that believe that AI will not affect us. The job of NLP is to solve language challenges, something that our industry was trying to solve, and for the longest time did not do it. To be frank with you, we didn't do a good job of solving language problems. And the reason for that is because there was a lot of greed attached to it. A lot of the bottlenecks were created so that it became difficult to process language. And obviously, the consumers of language decided to find another way. And this is one of those ways. Now, we can decide to be part of that movement and become part of something that's incredibly profound, or we could resist it and fight it. I don't think the latter would serve any benefits for us, and our industry could go the way of taxis versus Uber if we don't, welcome AI in our industry. There are still companies, mostly small, who believe AI is a fad and they won't be affected. I mean, I've had conversations with people who still think that their clients should not be using machine translation or why they're asking for it, and that's not very productive. But at the same time, AI represents opportunities for the language industry, as I mentioned. If we rethink, retool, and reinvent ourselves as an industry, we could be a big part of that $1 trillion economy of the future that's coming our way, that's already in taking shape. We have been one of the first adopters of serious and business applications of AI in the form of machine translation. And for years, we have been using it. We are champions of using AI, yet we are the ones resisting it the most. I think areas ripe for disruption with AI within the language industry includes things such as content transformation, like translation, right? That needs to be disrupted. Editing, analysis, summarization, anonymization, as well as speech related fields such as transcription, real time interpreting, and language training. All of these areas are up for grabs. We don't do it, someone else will do it, just like they're doing it right now. So it's up to us to whether we want to see it as a threat or as an opportunity.
And that is why I tried to envision a company that was something beyond just language, because I was a little bit scared of all this technology just taking over interpretation or translation. And I think that's why we need to look further when we are having some kind of business offering that has to do with some bigger umbrella where we can have room to include advancing technologies like artificial intelligence. So that I think you're right. When we think about this, we should be um, ready for the change. That's the only constant, as opposed to try to suppress it. It's just not going to take us anywhere. An excellent example about the taxis and Uber. So a lot of linguists, again, are worried about the technology, or they are dismissive, as you described. And I'm talking about interpreters and translators. How can they be successful as opposed to only surviving AI? And what would you recommend to them?
Carol, as I said, anyone that takes part in the language services business, whether it is an individual translator or the CEO of a large multinational LSP, that they must adapt. So if you look at AI as a pivotal turning point in our industry or in the history of humankind for that matter, we have to adapt. We don't adapt, we will not fit into this new society, into this new economy. First step is overcoming your pride, and then developing curiosity. Because if we are saying that no one else can do my job, or nothing else for that matter, because now AI is a thing and that can do your job, then if you have that amount of pride, unfortunately, that's a false sense of security, because that's not based on reality. Once you overcome that and you accept that there are things that can do my job, then you develop curiosity. How do they do it? And once you learn a little bit about that, you need to start learning how AI works at least at the simplest or principal level, so you have an idea about which part of the AI development pipeline or production lifecycle you could add value to. For example, do you want to create data for AI so AI becomes more intelligent? And by intelligent, it doesn't mean that it becomes Skynet and takes over the world. It means that it will have intelligence for the day, but every 6 months, every year, it needs to build more intelligence as our human society becomes more developed. Remember, we are a living organism as a society, and we always change, and AI has to adapt. AI that was trained in 2015 is not relevant today. So we need data to continuously train AI. um, there are movements in place such as reinforcement learning and so on, where AI continuously monitors people and learns from that and becomes better. But that technology is far out. I don't think it will. There will always be dependence on humans to train it. So a translator or someone working in our industry must think of in those lines. How can I um, use AI, or actually provide my knowledge to AI so it becomes better? And in the process, obviously, I will not just survive, but I'll thrive, given that there are trillions of dollars invested into this technology. And then, you have to think about the pipeline once you learn about it, whether you want to create, as I said, data for AI, such as sequence to sequence mapping of data like translation memories, to train an AI model in your own language, or do you want to post edit the AI output for human consumption? We do that as an industry today. So you need to think about those lines, how you are going to contribute. And obviously, there are lots of tools and information available on the internet for free. Mind you, there is a lot of garbage and things such as doomsday calling as well, that the world's ending with AI, which I suggest you should avoid. It's a waste of time. Remember, Carol, there was a time when probably accountants and teachers in school resisted the use of calculators. But today, accountants went to school to do accounting, which is mostly math. If they resisted the use of a calculator or spreadsheet today, I don't think they would find clients easily. Um, Become a user and expert of AI language tools, language models, and then you will be very comfortable actually creating solutions out of it and offering it to your clients. There was a time when people walked or moved heavy loads by hand. In some countries, probably they still do that. I guess that was the first push in human history to develop automation in the form of inventing the wheel, which allowed them to create carts from that. And they, I think at the beginning they were pushing these carts by hand, and later it allowed them to outsource transportation of items and people to animals such as horses pulling carriages. Then cars came along. Humans still add value in the transportation system in the form of drivers, mechanics, planners, and so on. I mean, self-driving cars are here. The effects will be there. It will be profound. But then again, humans have to adapt like they've done in the past. We need to think in those lines in our industry as well. Only then we can be successful.
And there is always room for humans, as you said. So if you were in a country where the language spoken is different from many of the languages that you already speak, and you face a health or legal challenge, do you think you would feel comfortable if someone tries to use AI to communicate with you? Would you still prefer a language interpreter, for example, or would you still prefer a document that has been translated or at least reviewed by a human?
I think, Carol, obviously, like anybody else, ideally I would prefer professional human service, whether that is verbal or text based language transformation. Because as I said earlier, people have emotions and intuitions which machines lack. AI, on the other hand, will soon be an assistive tool to help professionals to scale up. For example, it can be used for screening. Let's say you have a foreign hospital in Japan where people don't easily communicate in English. The AI could perform a basic triage in the language of the patient, request an interpreter for that language, and make a best guess assessment of urgency of the situation. It will not manage the whole flow or journey of patient in the hospital, but it takes away the workload and freeing up that one nurse who was used to perform check-ins at the front desk. So I would be comfortable if I interface with AI there. Now, on my comfort level interfacing with the different types of AI interfaces that are out there, it's a different story. For example, would I be using an iPad to talk to AI? Would I be using my phone? Whether I would be talking to a robot that looks like me? I don't know. Again, the output of AI needs constant and consistent monitoring for overfitting, which basically means that the AI does fine during training, but in some cases it messes things up in the real world. So it needs to be constantly monitored to make sure that it performs as good as it was trained. And I would be fine in a different country where I could raise my concern through AI and have a human professional step in to address that concern.
Um, Thank you, Sultan. And I think we can switch gears to talk a little bit about languages that are endangered. How can AI technologies be harnessed to preserve and promote these languages?
There's a lot of efforts going on to preserve endangered languages, Carol, and I believe AI can help. But I think the motivation to preserve some languages is more than the means or mechanism, because if we want to preserve them, we have to spend money. And typically, a language goes extinct when there is no interest, when there's no funding, when there's no people speaking it. So it is a bit of a dilemma. AI is expensive. Of course, sourcing data, annotating it, and creating structure costs a lot of money. I think the byproduct of business case for solutions like Google Translate is that it will end up preserving some languages where such technology giants invest in doing so. It allows the new generation of speakers of a dying language to speak with their parents and so on using such tools. We have to be careful because there is a reservation in some communities. They rightfully want to be in charge of their language, which is part of their identity and culture. As such, only they can decide how their language can be preserved and promoted. If they decide that their community must lead the efforts, then that is the threshold of effort that's available. I personally believe languages can be preserved and promoted when there is a business case for them, when there's investment in those languages. Communities wanting to preserve their languages must present that business case. And AI technologies have recently been used to decipher long extinct languages from tablets and text forms found in antiquity. I think there is also an exciting opportunity to revive certain dead languages, which will open up our eyes to parts of mankind's history that we don't know too much about. So yes, it can help with preservation of AI, but it comes down to human interest. If there is an interest, AI can be deployed to preserve and revive a specific language. But if a community itself wants to restrict access to that language, then obviously, there's only so much that can be done.
Right. Now, when we talk about disabilities, what efforts are being made to ensure AI based language access tools are accessible to people with disabilities?
I think we don't have to place a lot of emphasis and effort by default because uh, we do need to think of the comfort, but obviously we have to think about the level of comfort of people with physical, mental, or cognitive disabilities. I think AI was designed, and the primary purpose of AI is to complement people in things that they do. So it has been recently used to communicate with comatose patients who are unaware of their surroundings, but have lost the ability to connect with anything outside their minds. That opens up a new an exciting area for, with regards to connecting with people who are trapped in their bodies. And now we get to hear what they want to say, and we can, communicate with them. So I also think that AI's main goal is, as I said, help people do things better, faster, and easier. Robotics have been demonstrated to help people with physical disabilities. We have a case where a microchip embedded in a patient's brain communicate through Bluetooth with another device, enabling movement in lower extremities or their feet of that patient who had a spinal cord injury, and as a result, that person could walk and climb stairs. I actually saw the video recently, and it's very, very interesting. Similarly, it helps the blind in a number of ways. Subtitles and captions help the hard of hearing and so on. So AI does offer so many new avenues for people with disabilities to function normally. There must be more efforts made, of course, to assist people with disabilities to feel normal and productive. And I think it is a welcome opportunity for that community.
Yes, I am very excited about the subtitles, for example, because I see that as a very handy solution. But I must admit that I was very disappointed yesterday. We had the wonderful opportunity to provide American Sign Language for the President of the United States in his address yesterday for Memorial Day. But the interpreter wasn't on camera because there were all these subtitles coming, right? And so she was only interpreting for the public over there. But we were still very proud. But we were like, darn
Congratulations.
subtitles. Thank you so much. How can AI and machine learning algorithms be continually improved to better serve diverse language communities?
Carol, the improvement comes down to identifying use cases and solving problems. If we know 100% about the challenge or issue, we can most likely find solutions or ways to address that gap in parts or as a whole. Data is the core of everything. AI can be improved with better training, which comes from better data. Again, whether that's synthetic or natural data, language data, that's something that needs to be decided because we have things such as biases and so forth that we have to address and decide upon. Diverse communities will benefit from an improved AI as they get access to services in their own languages. We talked about that, but they must be willing to contribute by providing feedback about what is working and what is not, and potentially participate in developing AI solutions. And as I said, AI will only become mainstream when data becomes democratized, which is a tricky part of the equation today. We have so many things that is restricting the use of data, but without that data, AI cannot perform well. And if we don't have AI, then a lot of things such as access to languages, access to services in people's own languages, kind of there is a bit of a setback. So it comes down to balancing all of these different factors to make sure that people are satisfied and happy.
Are there any legal or regulatory challenges related to the use of AI for language access? And if so, how can they be addressed?
Yes, Carol. There are lots of hurdles and obstacles that must be overcome. So, training data is a challenge. Most large language models, as I said, are trained with people's privately owned data from their websites and so on, and making it illegal in some places like Canada. Just like in our industry, we have not really defined whether the client owns the translation memory or the translator or LSP. It is the same case with AI. That gray area must be addressed. AI models also, Carol, use private information from people, and we have the examples where private information was exposed by Google Translate. So that is another legal issue that we have to deal with over time. There are also restrictions where AI cannot be used. For example, healthcare insurance content in the US is prohibited from being translated by machine translation, which I think is an antiquated policy, but nonetheless, it is there as a legal challenge. So, yeah, there is a combination of different things that at this point make it difficult for AI to proliferate into different areas of our life. And there are regulations that are stopping it, there are legal challenges, and it's not easy, but I think it comes down to us to find solutions collectively.
So, what, in your opinion, what does the future of AI and language access look like?
In my opinion, I think, Carol, it's very, very exciting. I think we will enable more people to communicate and solve their problems in their own languages. AI will take a big load off of the shoulders of translators. It will reduce costs for places like hospitals and government agencies, and it will allow them to talk to their users for simple things. We talked about refugees looking for a bathroom or something. Now they can do that. They can help those people. They'll feel, pride and being able to address those small things, which means a lot for certain people when they are in that particular situation. It also means more people who were not being served before because of the small size of their community or lack of funding will now have access to certain services in their own languages. That I think is very, very exciting. The demand for our translators and their skills will increase as AI will bring in more work in the form of addressing critical functions like legal translation, medical interpreting, and so on in languages that were not served before, but AI brought them to the table. So I think that the future looks really good. I am very excited about it.
Yes, it definitely will help democratize language access, right? I think.
Absolutely.
Are there any exciting research or industry developments in the field of AI and language access that you find particularly noteworthy?
Carol, there's always something happening. There is a lot, and it's actually hard to keep up. I think the combination of neural networks, which obviously was powered by transformers, and knowledge graphs we talked about earlier. So, knowledge graphs are databases of knowledge. So, you can say White House and then describe that it is, the US presidential office. And then while you're translating, you can translate within that context. And you can also say White House. It could also mean that someone owns a house that's color of white. And depending on the context, your translation could be accurately translating the right context. So that presents a major leap, in my opinion, in language services output. I also believe that large language models will bring in a lot of value to us. We just have to start looking at leading the conversation and not following it or downplay it, just like we've done until now. And that needs to change that mindset. So, chat based AI models like Chat GPT and others are very exciting. I think we should start incorporating them in our workflows. I think we should welcome them and build new services around them. It means that we will be innovative, and finally, we can call a innovation in language space if we were able to put some of these technologies together and package it and sell it to our clients.
How can individuals and organizations contribute to promoting language access and supporting AI advancements in this area?
Carol, as I said, learn about what AI is and see what skills and potential you have that can contribute in building this machine to solve global challenges and problems. Think in the form of outcomes. Don't say I do translation. Say I help people in community X to access service Y, such as courts or hospitals. Then you will see real world challenges that maybe you can solve with available technologies, and you will become an expert of that. Um, I think we need to move away from the notion of generalization, where you tell people, "I do translation of any language for any industry, for any any kind of people or community, and so on," because we can't do that. We have to speak in people's real world problems. And if we do that, I think we are able to leverage AI. We are able to leverage our own experience, and we will become experts. Be open and welcome this change. Like we accepted automatic traffic lights on our streets at one point, we should do the same thing with AI. Complaining about a disruption really doesn't make it go away. You just have to be part of the solution.
Excellent point, or excellent points. And to close our podcast today, how would you title this podcast episode?
I think we covered a lot of things, but since our focus was more or less about language access and the context of AI, I would give it a title of AI as an enabler of language access. And obviously, I think that anyone would benefit from learning about this topic, but mostly it should resonate with LSPs and translators, interpreters, and anyone involved in the language industry that's concerned that AI in some way has some sort of a negative connotation, a negative impact on what they do, which it probably does, but they have to see it from a different line because every problem is also an opportunity.
Absolutely. And Sultan, it's been wonderful to have you in our podcast. Is there anything I should have asked you that you would like to answer?
No, I think you asked some really good philosophical questions as well as real world practical questions. And I think you're doing a great work. I congratulate you on the launch of your podcast. I look forward to hearing from your other guests who are sources of knowledge and authority in their areas of expertise. And if I can contribute in any way, by all means, you can count on me.
Thank you so much. We look up to you. You are a leader in the industry. I admire you greatly. I think you're a very generous entrepreneur, and that makes a difference for businesses that are just starting, like mine. So thank you so much. And it was such a pleasure to have you with us, Sultan, today.
I appreciate the opportunity, Carol. Thank you, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. And that wraps up another enlightening episode of Language Access Matters. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion on the profound impact language access has across various sectors of society. Let's remember that language access is not just an isolated topic. It intertwines with various fields, impacting lives and businesses in profound ways. As we continue this journey together into becoming a more inclusive society where we ensure equal access to services to those who don't speak the dominant language, we want to assure you that our company, Equal Access Language Services, through its podcast Language Access Matters, will be with you every step of the way. We are committed to bringing you thought-provoking conversations, expert opinions, and stories from the field and beyond. To dive deep into the subject matter and engage with leading experts in the field, we will release a new episode of Language Access Matters once a month. By featuring expert practitioners and individuals with diverse experiences, we aim to broaden the scope of our discussions and present a comprehensive view of the importance of language access. We encourage you to stay connected with us through our website, www.equalaccesslanguageservices.com, and our social media platforms. You can join the conversation, ask questions, and share your own stories and experiences. If you want to be part of our podcast, email us to podcast@equalaccesslanguageservices.com. Remember, language access matters to each and every one of us. By understanding its significance and actively working towards its advancement, we can create a more inclusive and equitable society. Thank you for being a part of the Language Access Matters community. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment with you in our future episodes.